in our series of living orthodoxy in a secular society. So, as always, we have questions. Tonight we're also joined by His Grace Bishop Christopoulos, as always, Father Athanasios and Father Tas. Sorry, always remember these nicknames. Tas, Father Athanasios from the college. Alright, so we've got a lineup tonight. We've got 16 questions. So, is there anything you want to say before we get started?
16 or 16?
16. We had 50 submitted. We have 50 questions submitted. So thank you everyone who submitted a question, and for those who actually took it seriously. We did get a few funny questions, but we put them in the bin. So, well, Timmy, did you want to say before we get started?
No, you can get started. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, right.
If I can't answer them, I'll pass them on to His Grace.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah,
With your blessing, Your Grace, of course. And then we can pass them
yeah, so if one can't answer it, then we've got the other. If none of them can answer it, then we're stuffed.
But thanks for having me again. It's always good
It's a
to
pleasure.
come back. You guys are always very welcoming.
Definitely. And we have pizza too. So.
That's it. It was sold straight away.
Okay, so the first one we got, I guess it's a basic one, we'll start on that. Is it more important to have a good knowledge of the Bible or of the lives of the saints? And then does a knowledge of the Bible suffice enough?
Now, I think when we ask these questions, it's quite obvious, where we're coming from. And I'm no different, so I'm not speaking down to you by any stretch of the imagination. I've come from the same place like you guys, right? We grew up in a Western society. I grew up in Canada. We grew up in Australia. For all intents and purposes, besides the weather, same kind of thing. We all went to school the same kind of way. And I think that really shapes the way we think about things. So, is it better to have knowledge of the Bible, of the lives of the saints? I think either one of them can be helpful. And I don't think it's a black and white answer. But as Orthodox, it's not about knowledge. I'm not going to get into the history of the faith and the Gnostics and those who believe they knew more than others and somehow separated themselves, but that's one way to think about it. In reality, it's more about a relationship with Christ. Our faith is about, God became man. And because He became man, we have the opportunity to have a relationship with Him. It's not as much about reading it in a book, it's more about working on that relationship. So that includes prayer, the ascetic life, prayer, fasting, the services of our church. Oh, okay. I thought somebody was cutting me off. Prayer, fasting, the services of the church, most importantly, in the Divine Liturgy and partaking of Holy Communion, those are the most important things. The knowledge of the faith, we live, like I said, in a Western world where we can learn now. Once upon a time, that didn't exist. It's a very new phenomenon. The whole idea of Protestantism, whereby it's all about the Bible and it's about the book. It's very nice for us to say that these days after we had the printing press. But before that, there was like one gospel book and it was like chained to the altar table sometimes because they didn't want anybody to steal it. That didn't exist. People couldn't read. Like, we actually live in a world where we can actually read and learn. And that's a modern phenomenon, right? So we have to remember that doesn't make us better. And following the faith is about having a relationship with Christ, which means following those things from our tradition. And I'll go back to it again. Prayer, fasting, the services, and partaking of the sacraments, I think, are the most important things. The other two, they're helpful, but they're not everything. It's a holistic approach in Orthodoxy.
Okay, we'll go to more of a heavier question. So this is, someone's obviously struggling here. It says, or she, I can cope how can I cope as an Orthodox Christian living in a secular society and feeling insecure about my self-worth, which has led to emptiness? I previously considered monasticism, so becoming a monk, as an escape, but now I realise it's not the solution and I want to get married, but my insecurities are holding me back.
Okay. I mean, it's very difficult to answer these kinds of questions in a public context. And I'm sure the fathers in His grace would agree that, these are really questions that you need to have, with your spiritual father in the context of confession. It's really hard to answer those kinds of questions here. But perhaps more generally, let's, thinking about insecurity, it's something various insecurities that people have these days are very common in a secular world, right? Where you're getting bombarded left, right, and center, and you're always being told you're not good enough, right? All of us are dealing with it, Your clothes aren't good enough, your car isn't good enough, your house isn't good enough. Like, just keep getting harassed by these things. And I know you're all on Instagram, so you all know what I'm talking about, right? But the reality is, as Christians, we can hopefully all of us can lean back on and know that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and we have, a God that created us, cares for us, died on a cross for us, and took all our sins on for Him, onto Him. And hopefully that should give us some inner strength, and know that we have somewhere to go that can carry us forward. But again, these kinds of specific questions I think really need to be dealt with in the sacrament of confession, obviously first in prayer. And if you haven't been to confession or you don't have a confessor, you need to consider that. You might not be there yet. You may be in a different point in your journey, but it's something you do need to consider, because it's like trying to take care of your health and you don't have a doctor, and you're just prescribing whatever drugs you feel like as you go on the fly. There's a reason why you can't do that. And it's the same thing in the church. There's a reason why you go to a priest or a bishop or an elder or somebody that can hear your confession or can hear some of your concerns even. Perhaps they're not a confessor, but at least they can hear your concerns and they can provide you, some advice. But I can't really offer that kind of advice in a public space. It'd be inappropriate.
We got a lot of questions that I think that, like, if the person had a spiritual father, wouldn't be asking these kind of questions, I think. And then I was thinking about this today. I think if we had spiritual fathers, then these kind of things wouldn't really. I don't know how necessary they would be. I don't know, what do you think of that, Father? These kind of talks.
Look, I think these things will always arise, and it's good that you guys feel comfortable to throw those questions out here and to have a place where you can go with them, especially in a secular world where, let's be honest, telling your friends you're going to a Christian fellowship isn't exactly the coolest thing on the planet, right? But the fact that you feel comfortable to come here and to do that and to put those questions out here, whether they would be answered or not by their spiritual father, they probably would, but it's good that they're asking them anyways. My thoughts, anyhow.
How can I lean on Christ during heartbreak?
How can I lean on Christ during heartbreak?
No, we didn't give you the easy ones tonight.
That's a pretty general, I guess. Look, as I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm listening to the question. I'm like, well, I mean, it's obviously something very specific the person is asking, and I don't really know it. And again, it comes back to having the context where you can speak one-on-one with somebody. But all of us, have the opportunity to have communion with God in prayer. And that's the first thing that we can lean on. I think the first one is, having a prayer rule is really important, and having something that you can lean on that can provide that foundation for you. A prayer that you follow by obedience, a prayer that you open yourself up and you pour it out for God to hear you. so we can answer. So in the first case, we need to do that. And in saying that, I just want to dispel probably some misconceptions in relation to that. Because don't think of prayer as a psychological thing. Don't think of prayer as something you just said, like the way Hindus think of a mantra that will, because you said those words, that somehow that's going to do something for you. Think of it as a conversation with God, right? And we're not like Catholics who think that without the Pope, you can't have your prayers heard by God. That's not our faith by any stretch of the imagination. And we had people fight for that, and to stand up and say that that was not our faith. So we can always lean on prayer because it's our pathway to communion with God. And that's, you might have heard this before, theosis, the idea of theosis, which means that we can become like God. Basically, it's our opportunity to become saints. And we can do that by prayer, by the second step, katharsis, and then we can work our way towards sainthood. But in Heartbreak, how can we lean on Christ? Well, we should always be leaning on Christ, first of all in our prayer rule, second of all in other prayers that we're doing, and partaking of the sacraments. I can't emphasize the need to be going to liturgy and partaking of Holy Communion enough. Like, we sort of brush it all off, and these days too, it's a bit better now. I know when I was a kid, we wouldn't even go to liturgy. We'd go to Sunday school, and then we'd come in just to commune, and then we'd go back out again. That's not a formula for success as an Orthodox Christian, okay? Because Sunday school actually occurred in places where they didn't have priests, they couldn't do liturgy, right? So it's like a supplement when you don't have liturgy, okay? So it's nice to learn, and this goes back to the first question. It's nice to learn, it's nice to have knowledge, but without a spiritual life, that knowledge is useless, like completely useless. There's no point. And we learned that when we were at the theological college, and I'm sure His grace in His studies and in His life, and the other clergy here who have studied learned that even the whole idea of theology or studying the scriptures and any of those things, without a spiritual life, they're wasted. You need to have that spiritual basis first. And that's why I always emphasize, I have a lot of parents call me and they say, "Father, when's Sunday school so I can bring the kids for Sunday school?" And I go, "The Divine Liturgy starts at about 9. I don't expect them to bring their kids for the Matin service that begins at 7:30. And they go, no, I just want to know when Sunday school is." I said, "Well, there's really no point in bringing your kids for Sunday school if you're not bringing them for liturgy." And the same thing goes for you guys, and goes for me, goes for any of us. For us as priests, if we're not doing liturgies and we're just sitting at home, what's the point? There's no church if there's no liturgy. They have the presence of Christ right there. And I know you're probably tired and don't want to wake up Sunday mornings or whatever else. I'm looking around the room. I'm tired Sunday mornings too. I don't want to get up sometimes too, right? That's the temptation. That's what we're all dealing with, right? But I think that's where it all crystallizes. That's where it all comes together in the liturgy, and with the partaking of the body and blood of Christ. So, that's where I would go.
Yeah. You graceful fathers want to add to that? Father Arthur? Okay. Awesome.
Unless you disagree with me, then we'll pass it on.
Wait for the harder questions. I'm going to break the order up of the questions because there's one that kind of segues well, like how to avoid this situation. And because someone said, how to know if you've found the right person before you're in a relationship. So before the heartbreak, how can you know if it's the right thing to pursue?
Are these questions from the same person?
I think they submitted that one first and then the heartbreak one. The day later.
I didn't know you heartbreak.
Everyone looks up.
Heartbreak Hotel. It's a hard knock life, guys. How do you know you found the right person? I just keep thinking back to the clip I saw of Father Asterios responding, saying, "You just know." That you guys have posted on your Instagram.
Someone saying the reel we did, Father Steady back in the day did a dating relationships talk, Yeah, we asked him, how do you know you found the right one? And we were talking before about how people just say, oh, you just know. And then we asked him, I was like, so well, then how do you know? And then he paused and he goes, you just know. And I was like, don't tell me that. I got up and walked off.
Look, I think what it comes down to again is discerning God's will, really at the end of the day. It could be relationships, it could be finding a job, it could be deciding what course to do at uni or college or what job to pursue. Any of these things all come back to, at the end of the day, what's God's will. That's what it comes back to at its heart, at its core, right? And we're constantly, as Christians, hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully, trying to discern what God's will is, okay? And how do we do that? There's a lot of trial and error involved. You're going to fall on your face a whole bunch of times, and that's okay. Because God doesn't expect us to be perfect. And I think of a book I read about parenting, funny enough, but this principle applies perfectly in everything we do in our lives. It's not that we're going to get everything perfect, but that we're in the process of being perfected, right? So in the process of becoming a saint, we're not saints now, and I hate when people tell me that they're not a saint, and they, that is an excuse, but I'm not either, right? But hopefully we're all in the process of trying to get to sainthood, right? And if we're doing that, if we're trying to get into that process, then we can try and discern God's will in that process. And how do we do that? The things that find us peace, things that give us peace. And what's peace? The peace that you feel inside. And the way I like to describe it, I said this the other day as well, and I keep bringing back this analogy. Think of a storm, and it's complete chaos. But in the middle of the storm, there's the eye of the storm, right? In the eye of the storm, there's peace, right? So that's where we need to be. We need to be in the eye of the storm, hopefully discerning God's will in and amongst all the chaos. And coming back to the topic that we're talking about, the secular world, there's chaos around us. We all know that. I described it on the Sunday of Orthodoxy, where I had to drive. I live in Canterbury and I had to drive to Crow's Nest, and I had to see all kinds of obscenities as I was going to Crow's Nest because they were having the parade that day. And I was thinking, God help me, what is going on right now? That's sort of like an example for all of us when we go out into the world. It's not always that hectic, but I think all of us feel it if we're trying to live Christian lives. But hopefully, if we have those things in place, we have a prayer rule, we're going to confession, we're going to liturgy, we're in that rhythm of the church. There's a rhythm. If you actually follow it, you'll see there's a rhythm. There are times we fast, there are times we feast. There are times when there are more services, there are times when there are less services. There are times when just within ourselves we're struggling and we need to go and call up our spiritual father and say, look man, I'm not handling it right now. Can you help me get through this? And other times we're on cloud nine. And so if we're entering into that rhythm, that process, and we're trying to find that peace, and we'll deviate, we'll fall off the line, off of that pathway sometimes, and we're trying to find our way back. And in terms of relationships, it's the same thing. It all falls into the same category of discerning God's will in the chaos, and that's by following the rhythm of the tools that we have before us in the church. I don't know if that answers the question. If you have any more questions after that.
The person you asked wants to push further after. I'm sure he's happy to go further. With all these questions as well, even if you're another one who asked, sure afterwards the fathers will stay around and if you're comfortable with that.
As long as I don't have a line about the door.
Broken hearts. No, it is serious, but I shouldn't laugh, but the heartbreak thing is serious, but
It is.
yeah, but Christ is there, so Christ is there for us. I was reading that question, how do I lean on Christ during heartbreak? And my brother wrote the questions down, and he spaced out the words so much, and the two words that are together and separate from the rest are lean on Christ. Just like, how can I lean on Christ during heartbreak? It's like it's in the question, we lean on Christ, and like follow through the sacraments.
I think now
I would probably add something else to what I said about relationships. In an Orthodox context, not just in an Orthodox context, and I said this in my talk when I was at Rose Bay too. I get a bit worked up. I'll try not to this time. When people talk about what we do as Orthodox, what we do as Christians, and we talk about it as if it's like another religion, as if we equate it with other religions. I don't believe that at all. In fact, I think, in reality, Christ came to abolish religion. He came as the light of the world to sort of shine light on what reality is. And as Christians, we can't just say we do that because we're Christians. We do that because Christ has shown us the right way. He's shown us reality, okay? Otherwise, we're living in fantasy. So I think it's very important to remember that first as Christians. If we have that as our focus, and we know that Christ is our focus, and through him we can see what reality actually is, then it makes it a lot easier when we ask these questions. We think, what do I really need to do in my life? I'm following God because that's the reality. That's the way we need to be looking at it. But as soon as we equate it with other religions, it's not helpful. It's really not helpful. Because I'll tell you right now, I want you to look around at all these religions and find one where the God is on a cross and dies for the sins of everybody. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist anywhere. Have a look if you can find it. I'm happy to give you $100. You're not going to find it. The reality is that's what sets it apart, because it's real. It's very real. And leaning on Christ, the one who died for us and took on all our sins, yeah, that's reality. Sorry, I get worked up when I say that.
No, I wanted you to. It's good. Yeah.
Just on heartbreak, the heartbreak, the heartbreak question. My experience is limited, but obviously His graces and others, they're much more extensive. And usually what the bishop or the priest sees is the catastrophe, the disaster, the brokenness. In other words, people come with the problem already having taken place, basically. Many times seemingly irreparable. But you have an opportunity here, I think, in all honesty, with these gatherings and the different topics from week to week, and the mutual encouragement to one another, and with the care of His Grace and Father Athanasius especially here, you have the opportunity to fortify and strengthen yourselves to be a little bit more resilient to the ups and downs of life. During Lent, now this period, the Church gives us 3 particular books of the Old Testament to read. The book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, which is, of course, starts with creation and then moves through various important stories of God-fearing people who came into a relationship with God and who were tested in very profound ways. Then there is the book of Isaiah, the prophet, which gives prophecies, messages from God, and some very key ones, such as the fact that a virgin will give birth and this will be a sign from God, and obviously that's fulfilled in Christmas. And obviously another great vision of Isaiah where he prophesies about the suffering servant, the one who is of God but who will bear the sufferings of humanity. And we will see that fulfilled in Holy Week and on the cross. And then the third book is the book of Proverbs, which is all about how to live a godly and God-fearing life. And it's very practical lessons. Some of them are a bit hard to follow, but some of them are very straightforward. This is the diet, this is the food the Church gives us to instruct us, to teach us, but also to strengthen us, give us a little bit of courage, give us a bit of resilience, because it's not a question of if life will throw difficult moments at us, it is only a question of when those difficult moments will come to us. And one of the stories from Genesis that the Church in her daily readings lingers over a little bit more than others actually happens to be these days now and last week. when he was presenting us the story of Noah. And Noah was, as most of you I imagine would know, instructed by God under very bizarre circumstances to build an ark because supposedly a flood was coming. This is an extraordinary story, but Noah, because he was a singular man, singular meaning a very unique and devoted man, he obeyed that word and he built an ark which looked completely foolish to everyone around him. What does this really mean without getting into the story of pairs of animals and things like this? Although we should teach our children these stories and you should learn these stories. The point is, he built an ark. He fortified himself and his family under God's care. There's no problem yet, but there is a problem looming. There is a problem on the horizon. There is a problem coming. And he fortifies himself. So it's a message that all of us in our Christian life need to fortify ourselves spiritually in times which seem okay. You have opportunity now. Your opportunity is to come here. Your opportunity is to go to church. Your opportunity is to bond with one another, make friendships, make meaningful contact. Have some contact with His Grace, with Father Thanasius as the people here, the clergy who are responsible for this church. Or if you belong to other parishes, you have your priest there. You have your family. If your family is intact and not dysfunctional, forgive me for saying it like that, because we suffer these problems as well. But we build the ark of our soul. We build the ark diligently, tapping away with our hammer, carrying the planks of wood, putting things in their right places, and we do it now that we can. Rather than waiting for the calamity and the heartbreak and the betrayal and the disappointment and the frustrations, we do our best now so that when those difficulties come, doesn't mean we won't have heartbreak, but maybe it will be a different kind of heartbreak. Maybe it will be a different type of disappointment. Maybe it will be a different type of dejection, which does not take us to the pit of Sheol, to the pit of Hades and death, because we can get a bit extreme in our modern society as to how we feel. We overrate our feelings. But instead, it will be something that will be sad for a time, difficult for a time, but we'll get out of it. It won't be a complete trough, but it'll be a dip. So I think we have to be a little bit practical about our everyday Christian life and grab opportunities, because the spiritual life is not about recipes, it's not about magic wands, it's not about spells and potions that a priest or a bishop can give, okay? That's not the sacraments. That's not Holy Communion. That's not Holy Unction service, the Holy Oil service which is given to us on Holy Wednesday. That's not Epiphany blessing with the blessing of the waters that we go around the houses, and we bless people's homes and they come and kiss the cross and receive a blessing. But yet sometimes we walk into houses and we're blessing icons next to Buddhas, next to, I don't know what other, Chinese symbols, I mean, we've got to get real about our orthodoxy and our Christianity and have a little bit of courage and a little bit of confidence and a little bit of mutual support to build the ark of our Christian life carefully. Okay, because some type of flood, small or large, is likely to come across us. Could be an illness, could be, some difficulties in our family, could be difficulties in friendships, at work, whatever the case may be, And we are not robots. We are flesh and blood human beings who hurt deeply, we cry, we have sadness, but we also have a great capacity for joy and for bouncing back, You see that in little children very often. They fall down, they'll cry a bit up, they'll bounce back up and get back to their toys, We need to cultivate a sense of bouncing back, carrying on, not just, faltering at the first sign of difficulty. I don't wish to undermine or understate anyone's, hurt in difficult circumstances. Please don't take me the wrong way. But let's try, all of us, myself first, to build the ark of our soul, just like Noah did faithfully. And we work at it with all the gifts that the church gives us. The liturgies, the services, the scriptures, the lives of saints, everything. It's not an either-or proposition. You have a wonderful treasure, and there are many gems and jewels in there and priceless things. Grab whatever you can, use it, and build wisely. And if you don't know how to fit something in the right spot, then you ask a tradesman who's a little bit more experienced, you know, like a bishop, like a priest, you know, like a more, you know, informed friend, you know, to help you to tap away and build at the ark of your soul carefully. That's all I had to say about heartbreak.
Thanks for that. So the next question, how to maintain between two different worlds, in particular Christian faith and then going out having fun with friends who are not faithful. So if you can maintain
Oh, I think you can maintain it. You can maintain that. Well, first of all, you need to put boundaries in place, right? First, that's the first thing. You got to put boundaries in place, and sometimes those boundaries mean certain people are no longer helpful to you living a Christian life, and those people, yeah, you can't maintain relationships with, right? But I think for the most part, people are pretty good about that. I think I probably experienced that with friends of mine that I had when I moved to Australia, that I had in Canada when I was, you know, when I was growing up and stuff like that. I just, you know, things changed in my life and things were going a different direction, and I wasn't happy to hang around them when they were doing things that I wasn't interested in anymore, or wasn't interested in to begin with, but that I tolerated in the past, let's say. But sometimes you have to make those hard decisions, and you need to say no to things. Yeah, that does need to happen, and sometimes you have to put boundaries in place and say that, yes, you know, we can hang out, but in this context. You know, I'll come and hang out with you if we're gonna go out for dinner, or we're gonna go out, but these are my boundaries. And I think having boundaries is really important. Having like firm boundaries and not moving from those things. Again, going back to what Father Anastasios was saying about building the ark. Well, part of building the ark is building in boundaries into your life. You know, there's certain things that, you know, I'm not going to do that. You know, you block it out. You don't do certain things, and so you just have to put those in place, and you need to be willing to live with those. But if you're going to follow Christ, you need to be willing to do that, because He's quite clear that He brings a sword. He wasn't going to make everything, you know, all nice and easy for us. There will be a struggle that ensues if we follow Christ, right? Every time you take one step towards Him, yes, He's going to give you His grace, but there's also going to be a pushback, right? Unfortunately, people don't want to talk about things like there's evil and there are demons and, you know, there is temptation. Those things are actually real, okay? They're not just fairy tales. They're not just things you see in a cartoon where there's an angel and a demon on somebody's shoulder. Like, in a way that expresses a reality, okay? So, yeah, I think it depends on the situation. Every situation is different, but having boundaries is very important. And yet some people you just can't hang out with because it's just not going to be helpful for you in your Christian life.
Next question, I hope this is the last relationship question.
Yeah.
How do you know you're ready for marriage? So maybe what are some markers, I guess, practical markers, I guess you can say yourself to know you're ready for marriage?
I think we need to start at basics first. So if we're getting all these relationship questions, can we start with the basics? First of all, what are relationships for? Well, you know, in the context of the church, in the context of Christianity, it's, you know, the goal is marriage, okay? You know, I remember growing up and my friends were just going out with people because they just wanted to have fun. I never saw the point in that. It didn't make any sense to me, because I was always taught that marriage is the end goal, because that's where we're going to find our salvation, right? And again, this comes back to exactly what we were saying before. Okay, the whole point of the Christian life is to attain to sainthood, to find our salvation, to be with Christ in His kingdom for eternity. Okay? It doesn't work if you want to have like a secular relationship the way other people do, and then somehow you want to get married afterwards. It kind of doesn't work, okay? God can transform everything, and He has, and I've seen it, and I've seen people even in my family maybe got into a relationship for the wrong reasons, but did end up getting married, and it ended up being okay. But it really needs to start there. It really needs to start with your goal is marriage. And so you can probably alleviate a whole lot of heartbreak by making sure that that's your basis for getting into a relationship to begin with, right? Because if you both know that, then there will be certain boundaries in place, right? And certain things that only exist in the context of marriage, which can alleviate heartbreak for people down the track, all right? One of those things, everybody taboo, nobody wants to talk about it, but reality is sex only exists in marriage for a reason, okay? And the church is very clear on that for a very good reason, okay? The reason is that it's something that is actually quite sacred. It exists within marriage, and when you partake of that outside of marriage, it actually causes massive issues to you spiritually, and causes issues to you later on when you do, God willing, get married. Or if you don't get married, you become monastic, for example, you're going to be plagued by that for the rest of your life as well. Okay, so this is, these are some ways, some things that are in place that actually protect you moving forward. Okay? People think that it's just old-fashioned and stupid, but no, it's not the case at all. We have 2,000 years plus the previous, under the old covenant of experience. The sexual revolution was in the 60s, not that long ago, okay? Before that, it was always taboo to have those things outside of the context of marriage. So, things have changed massively with secularization, doing away with Christian values. Even just traditional cultures had particular values as well that, in some ways were similar. But Christianity, of course, had a very radical view of what marriage was. Even under the old covenant, that didn't exist, where monogamy didn't really exist. Look at Abraham, you look at Jacob, and some of the other patriarchs. Like, they had multiple wives. That was the commonplace back then. But if you look at it through the context of you with that other person are finding your salvation together, that changes the whole game. It changes the whole thing. That you're looking for somebody that's going to help you find your salvation, that's going to make you better, that's going to take you from being you as an individual, as good as you're going to get pretty much at that point, to somebody that can attain to sainthood. And some people, like for me, for example, that's through the context of marriage. For other people, it's through monasticism with their brotherhood and their elder that's going to help them find their salvation. But you need somebody there who's going to help you move towards your salvation. So if we're not speaking in those terms, it's never going to work.
Do you think someone should be at a certain point in their relationship with Christ before they even consider marriage?
I don't think it's black and white by any stretch, no. I personally believe that people wait to get married after getting engaged, or they're in long-term relationships, which leads to massive issues as well. I don't think that's helpful at all. I think if people are in what they consider a stable, long-term relationship, they should get married. Like, or if they don't want to get married, they should break up and move on. Because otherwise, it's a waste of time. And I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but I mean, that's the reality, because you end up creating heartbreak for no reason sometimes, right? When you don't understand the context of some of these things. Where should somebody be if they're, how do they know they're ready to get married? When they found that person that they want to find their salvation with, they should go and get married. There shouldn't be any wait, there shouldn't be any hesitation. But in the world, we have all these ideas, I need to save money, I need to have my career in order, I need to do all these things, wow. It's rubbish, sorry. It really is rubbish. Because I've seen so many people that's, for example, okay, started off with not a whole lot, they got married quite young, started off with not a whole lot, they worked together and they built what they needed to have. God gave them what they needed. right? But we live in a world where we think everything depends on us. And we become gods in our own right. That's secular. That's the secular world. We're gods in our own right. I do whatever I want, right? So I want to wait until I have my car. I want to wait until I have my deposit to buy my house. I want to wait until I've got another property so I can make money off of it. And what have you done for your salvation, though? Right? Christ tells us to build up treasures in heaven, not to build up treasures here. Because one day, I know you guys are young and you're not thinking about this, but ask His Grace or ask Father Athanasios over here. There are funerals happening quite often. People do die. And that is a reality that we will all face one day. You're young and you're thinking you're not going to experience that, but that's the reality, right? So if you're not building up treasures in heaven, you're building up treasures here. It's like a little kid making a house out of Lego and depending on that to be his house, right? Eventually he's going to grow up, he's going to realize that's not the house he wants, right? You're doing the same thing in God's eyes. You're looking at this house that you've built in this world and you're going, it's not really worth that much. Because at the end of the day, you're going to die, it's going to get bowled over, they're going to knock it down, they're going to build a new house, the next generation. And I think it's really important to remember that. To remember that when we're moving forward in our relationships, because sometimes people, I hear it all the time, I hear it from my sisters, I said the same thing, so I'm guilty as charged, We all do it because we're influenced by the world, but it doesn't help us. It just creates more issues. Yeah.
So I was going to say, you said that you can be young and not have money to get married, but the Greek wedding is actually a very pricey service.
Yeah, in what way?
A lot of like the event, depends like what type of gigs you want.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people for catering and like music and everything.
Yeah. It's all the things that we think we need to do for weddings. Yeah. But in reality, let's put it this way. If somebody came to me and wanted to get married and I knew they didn't have that much money, I'd do the wedding for them at the church for free. And then I'm sure we'd find a way to help them out. Okay? It doesn't cost that much to get married at all. So, yeah.
We've created the ideas.
I think obviously all of these questions are very important, but I think it shows that that we haven't understood the importance of having a spiritual father. If we don't have anyone to receive guidance from, obviously things will be much more difficult in our life. So we can't stress enough the importance of having a spiritual father to discuss all these things. And I know that many of you feel terrified with the thought of opening your hearts to someone dressed in black. But you need to understand that we're human beings as well. Most of us are married. We have children. We have our own problems. So we're not, but even those who are not married, like His Grace is very experienced spiritual father. So please don't allow yourself to feel isolated, because that's what the devil wants you to feel isolated, that there's no one out there to help you. So it's very important to have a spiritual father, and as well to understand that, yes, obviously falling in love, finding the right person, all of these things are important. But as Father Timothy was saying, the reality is that you need something more than just falling in love with a person, being attracted to them. Because you get married, the kids come into the picture, all the responsibilities, and you need to have something more than just being attracted to someone. And that something is Christ. So as Father Anastasios was saying, we're going through Lent. We've got daily services. People go to confession. We have Holy Communion. Allow this period to touch your soul. Unfortunately, as Orthodox Christians, sometimes we're very blasé about our faith. It becomes more of a cultural tradition where Easter for us is about, making the pulurakia, the Easter eggs, the magiritza on Easter Saturday night. It's very discouraging to see that we have a treasure, which is our Orthodox faith. We have all these spiritual weapons that our church gives us, and we treat our faith so in a very superficial way. So I encourage you all to use this period of Great Lent to get to know your faith more. Go to confession. Confess in a very honest way. Don't just turn up and say, I'm a good person, I haven't killed anyone, therefore I don't need confession. We all need confession, as we all need to go to a doctor when something is not well with our health. What do? We go to the doctor, right? It's the same thing with our spiritual health. We need guidance. We need forgiveness of our sins. And we need to enter into a deeper relationship with Christ. Okay, so these are all valid questions, very good, we understand, but we need to experience our faith in a more deep spiritual way. And as Father Anastasius said, somehow, when we have faith in Christ, we will realize that these problems are not that big. They're smaller. It's just that the devil wants us to see our problems bigger, so we can freak out, we can lose our faith in Christ, and then suddenly we're rudderless. We don't know what we're doing, and we start making more and more mistakes, and then despair falls in. Okay? So please, let's all make an effort to take our faith more seriously.
Do you want to say anything else? So the next question, how do we make sure to use the gifts God has given us in a meaningful way, I guess, to serve Him instead of serving ourselves?
I mean, first of all, trying to discern what those gifts are is the first step. I like this, you guys hear this all the time, the modern secular, sort of mantra. You can do anything you put your mind to. No, you can't. Sorry to break it to you that way. I'm being quite blunt for a reason, just so I can get your attention on this. But I know friends of mine that were determined to become mathematicians, really wanted to do physics and become an engineer. Okay, he could not rearrange a 3-variable equation. Okay, that was not going to happen. Okay, so first step is you got to discern what you're good at first. Okay, the things that you're good at, you'll find those as you go through life. Okay, you'll find the things you're good at as you go through life. You'll realize, oh, you know what? I actually really like doing things with my hands, for example. And you might like working on cars. You just be naturally drawn to it. You can't explain these things. I've been listening to a podcast recently, and I've been listening to quite a few of. I don't know if anybody knows Jonathan Peugeot. He's Canadian, so I had to follow his podcast. But it's really important, something that he said in one of the talks that he had. He's an icon carver, and he also does talks, videos, and podcasts in relation to symbolism. And he's coming from an Orthodox perspective. Okay, he's a convert to Orthodoxy. He's French Canadian, but he said something that was really important. That we often, because we live in a modern secularist or postmodern secularist world, now I'm going to start using philosophical talk, so forgive me. But we think of things, unfortunately, we've taken a materialist scientific approach to things, right? And we want to see things in, oh, it's 30 degrees today. Oh, I went there and it took me 20 minutes. We try to quantify everything to explain it all in scientific terms, but we don't actually experience life like that, right? Did you experience 30 degrees the other day, or 38 degrees, whatever it was the other day? It was blazing hot.
Yes.
Did you experience 38 degrees, or did you think it was really hot?
Really hot.
Yeah, that's it. So you thought it was really hot, right? So that's our experience of the world. So that's really important, because we're sitting there trying to quantify and make sure everything is really clean cut, but that's not the way the world works. That's not our experience of the world. And if what we get from the church, the tools that we're given, is in relation to our experience of the world, we need to actually live life to experience it. We can't just sit back with a microscope and look at things under a microscope. We're not going to get anywhere, right? So in terms of finding out what you're good at, that's trial and error, first of all. Trial and error, going through life. None of you guys are 2 years old. I'm pretty sure you know what you're good at by now. To some extent, right? And then finding what you're good at will then help you discern what you should do moving forward. And sometimes it's not even something you want to do, okay? I worked as a lawyer. I hated it, but you know what? I was pretty good at it. Things directed me that way, right? I was directed towards that. In some ways I didn't fit in a whole bunch of things, and then I ended up becoming a priest. It was something that I was drawn to from a young age. I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old when I was demanding that my mom bring me to church in the morning before the first gospel, because I had to be there before the first gospel. Okay, what 5 or 6 year old kid does that, right? I did, because I was drawn and pulled towards something. And I think any of us who have experienced life know that we're drawn or pulled towards something in our lives. Perhaps not as obviously as that for me, but it wasn't always so obvious to me. Even up till a few years ago, I wasn't sure. Am I meant to be a priest or not? It's very easy to be sure about something after you've done it, you've made that decision, you've gone into it, and you can feel that this is natural. It's for me now, right? You guys, many of you are in a position where you're still figuring that out. First of all, it's trial and error. I think what Father Thanasi was saying earlier about having a spiritual father is very important to help you discern things along the way. It's helpful to have somebody there that responds as opposed to our own thoughts, because I think going back to the way the modern world works is, you end up in your head. And I think it's no wonder that we have these crazy incidences of mental health issues when people are constantly in their own heads and don't have anybody else to speak to. You can often go and speak to somebody else pretty quickly and they'll go, yeah, that's rubbish, just move on, right? Or, things aren't actually like that. I think you're taking it too far. Even things as simple as that. So I think having somebody to speak to is helpful, getting advice, but also living your life and finding where you're drawn to as well. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else in relation to.
So there's another question saying, what to do if you're confused about which career path to take. But I think that kind of answers that, just trial and error. And Father Timothy said it was kind of like that for you until you ended up where you are now. So
you have to be willing to give it a go. Don't just sit at home and say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's better to do something than to do nothing. Because when you do nothing, you sit back, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You can fall into despair because you're actually not doing anything. And you actually need to live it and experience it.
I think we're in the age of procrastination, where we get to obviously think a lot about what we want to do in our lives, but when it comes to the crunch, where we have to make decisions, we prefer to sit down and watch a Netflix movie or scroll, watch or go on our iPad. Or I think technology has a lot to do with that as well. We're just so overstimulated with everything, all this information, that we don't have that drive, that spiritual drive to offer assistance. Like, for example, I get many people asking me, Father, you know, how do I, you know, become a part of the life of the church? And you know, I give them practical opportunities. Like, I'll mention to them that, you know, we've got the feeding program, we've got volunteering in the church, we've got, you know, you could become a scripture teacher or a Sunday school teacher, you could become a fellowship coordinator, all these practical things. But a lot of people find it difficult to commit because we're used to just sitting there and preferring not to do anything. But, you know, we stress about life, but yeah, we just procrastinate. So I think it takes commitment as well. Like, you know, if you want to do something, you have to get off the couch and do it.
Okay, I think we'll start a lighthearted question here, but I think it could become a little deeper. So is it a sin is it a sin to watch movies? And I think if they're asking that seriously, I think it's probably something we should answer, because I think I was at a point like that in the spiritual life where I was guilty to watch a good movie. I felt guilty to actually watch like a Hollywood movie or something that maybe just had a bit of violence, like nothing crazy, and I felt guilty about it. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, look, a lot of the movies these days, yeah, probably not helpful to our spiritual life. So you can feel that way, but we mustn't be, you know, too pietistic either and think watching any movie is bad for you, you know, is bad and you shouldn't do it because it's a sin. I wouldn't take it that far. But as Christians, we need to be discerning, right? And giving, obviously you can't, in this case again, you can't give a black and white answer. It's not like that. Life isn't like that. You all know that. You're living lives. You know things aren't that cut and dry. You know, there are times where we have to think about it, and you'll make the wrong decision sometimes. That's okay. Make the wrong decision. That's okay. Do that. But then it's through that process you get better at discerning what you can and cannot do. So with movies just one example. Again, we keep talking about specific things and it keeps going back to the general because everything you do it ends up being the same thing. But at the same time, and this is a danger, we don't want people to make everything into like an existential crisis. You don't want everything to be like this moral crisis, like, oh my God, if I watch this movie, I'm going to go to hell. Like, let's not do that, okay? Let's not go there. Let's not do that. That's not helpful, right? Let's not make every minor decision that we make in our lives that serious as well, right? Where we think it's the end of the world if we make this decision. Okay, we need to actually live our lives, like Father Thanasi was saying, get off your couch, make a decision, do something, move forward. That's what Christ is giving us. He's giving us the freedom to live our lives. We're gonna make mistakes. That's why he gave the apostles the ability to hear and to forgive sins. Okay, you're gonna sin along the way. That's okay. We shouldn't be trying to sin, obviously, but we can't also not do anything because we're afraid we're gonna sin. And I think that question is in that kind of spirit, whereby, I can't watch any movies because it's a sin. I mean, that's really not helpful. If you really want to, there are many Christian movies out there with a Protestant slant. Obviously, not always that helpful, but some of them are not too bad. And we've tried that, watching some of those with our kids, and some of them are pretty good. So you can start there, but watching Hollywood movies, they're not all bad. And there will be things that will tempt you, but that's something that happens in our everyday lives. We're going to encounter things every day that tempt us. Does that mean we're not going to go out our front door? I mean, that's ridiculous.
I think you know your weaknesses too. You know
Yeah.
what kind of movie you shouldn't watch, what movie you can tolerate, just by what's in the content and the themes.
Yeah.
And once you engage in your spiritual life, I think you start to know yourself. You know your boundaries. You know your weaknesses. You become adept in the spiritual warfare. You know, like they say. And then after a while, the movies you used to watch, they had like I used to love just action movies and like heaps of violence and stuff. But now, even watching boxing and that, the violence kind of like, after a while, if you become very deep into the spiritual stuff and you're reading and you stay away from that stuff, you abstain from it, and you watch it again, it shocks you. Like that level of violence, that level of graphicness will shock you, and you'll wonder how you got, so addicted to it, and how you loved it so much, and you have become desensitized to it. You realize now how sensitive your soul is to that stuff.
It's interesting that you raised that. As Christians, it's actually good to be sensitive to things, and we can't be desensitized. Like, we need to try not to be desensitized, because it's actually it becomes a spiritual delusion, really. Whereby we experience something that's so often, something that at first shocked us, and now we're just like, it's no big deal. We'll just go for it. So it's really important to maintain that. But the other thing that you said is really, really important. That self-actualization, that self-realization is really what the spiritual life is about. And a spiritual father, for us who are in the world, isn't there to give us a rule for absolutely everything we do in our life. Like, don't call your spiritual father and say, can I go to the bathroom right now? That's not what it's for, okay? But like, those kinds of things do happen. That's why I'm saying it, okay? And I'm not pointing anybody out, obviously. I'm just saying that kind of thing can happen. That's not what you do. You don't call your spiritual father every time you make a decision to watch a movie, for example, okay? But what it is that spiritual father should be guided, will guide you in a way for you to realize who you are and to realize which things afflict you. And in so doing, you will be better at navigating life. All of these questions will be easier to navigate when you know yourself better, right? And that's what a spiritual father is for. That's what the sacrament of confession is for. It's not like the Catholics where you sit behind the screen and they take all your sins and you tick them off and you say, yeah, see you later, okay? I'll come back to you when I have more sins to add to my list. And once those are wiped, we'll add some more and we'll do it again. That's not what it is. It's actually a relationship with your spiritual father who gets to know you and tries to guide you to find more about yourself. You don't go to them so they can tell you should be doing this, this, and this. They might do that. That might happen too. But that's not the point. The point is that the spiritual life is about you finding ways to live your life better towards Christ. Orienting your life towards Christ and getting to know who you are and how you're going to do that.
Fathers, Grace? Anything to add?
I think it's getting harder and harder. Like as parents, you want to take your children to watch a children's movie, but the way society is going, like with all these, hidden notions, like in children's movies, like you see it, like
Fluidity rubbish.
yeah, gender fluidity and all these things, and your children are just sitting there and watching, and they're like, "What does that mean, Dad?" And then you have to sit down and discuss. But I guess that's a good thing as well, where as parents, you'll become, you'll get married and have your own kids, and you'll be able to have those discussions openly with your children. The church is not afraid to discuss these things. It's important that as Christian parents, we are able to openly discuss these things, because if it's not us talking with our kids about these things, it'll be other people who are not the right people to discuss all these new modern notions in our society. But personally, I like Lord of the Rings, so anything that has to do with Lord of the Rings, anything, I've got no problem. But obviously, you need to use discernment, because, even today, the way the movies are going. Like sometimes it's just fast forwarding, and you end up fast forwarding more than 3/4 of the movie. It's like, what's going on here? But yeah, you need discernment, and I like what Evan said, that the more you advance spiritually, you know which movie is the one that will tempt you. So we need to be careful.
Did anyone want to ask a question off the cuff? No one want to raise anything? Yeah.
I'd like to say it's like a helpful, like a practical thing is, if you want to watch a movie, it's normal. Don't rely on things that are pushed in front of you, like streaming services or the cinema, where someone is giving something to you they want you to see. Rather, you can actually go to like a video store, you can go to the classic section, and you can actually find something and look out for something yourself, which makes it easier, like it's been said, to avoid the things you know are going to affect you. And like DVD that's like a movie from the 60s, which are usually better anyway, is like $5 sometimes. It's pretty easy. That's something I would say is like a practical tip.
Do video stores still exist?
I thought they were closed. To be honest.
I used to go to video. If there's one still around, tell me, man. I'd love to go.
It's only $5 a movie. They still open. I think you raised something really important though, especially given technological advances today. Advertising and the stuff that they're putting in front of you, it's like, I know this is going to sound really sinister, but it's exactly what the demons do. They learn about you and they give you what you want, and they play into your passions. It's exactly what advertising does on your phone or on your computer. I know most people just use their phones for everything these days, which is fine, but that's exactly what they do. Advertisers are finding what gets you, what you look at. They're even keeping an eye on what you're looking at so that they can get you and give you that stuff again, okay? So it's making the spiritual battle, even more difficult. But you raised it. What you raised it there is really important. Like, they'll put something in front of you knowing that you're gonna want it, and they're gonna put it there for you, and it might not be what's good for you. So something to think about as you're going through and trying to discern what's good or not good for you in your life, especially using technology. I'm scared to look at what my usage is on my iPhone.
One question.
Father, I think we could rename the title of this session, The Importance of a Spiritual Father. But I do want to just maybe highlight a personal experience. And I remember going to my spiritual father on many occasions. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. I remember going to my spiritual father on many occasions and saying, I fancy this lady, and I'm married now. But I remember going to my spiritual father and saying, I got it wrong 3 times. Yeah. I got it wrong. Yeah. So I've experienced a heartbreak, and it's hindsight's obviously an amazing thing. But I remember, and it's very, I think we've spoken about the importance of a spiritual father, but also from my hindsight, the importance of having unconditional trust in our spiritual father. That they love us unconditionally, and that any advice that they are going to give us, it is the best advice for our spiritual health. And I remember on several occasions walking away from confession and not having that feeling of, I feel light, and actually feeling really upset and really troubled because he didn't give me the answer that I expected, or the answer that I wanted, the selfish answer. And I can say that in obedience, I followed his advice. And from a hindsight perspective, I remember when I introduced my wife Victoria, and when we have the same spiritual father, and when his first thing was absolutely yes, when's the wedding? And leaving my confession, and just the only thing that was on my mind was glory to God. And sometimes, the reason why I want to share this is just to give everyone positive encouragement that put your trust in your spiritual father. Put your trust in the advice that they give you, because there will be that time when it's the right time and the right person's for your spiritual benefit, and it just the only thing that it leads to is the glory of God, and of course our salvation.
Thanks for sharing that. Father, if you want to say anything else?
No, thanks for sharing that, because I experienced that a few times too. You walk out of confession like, I did not want to hear that right now. I actually don't want to do that. And then you do, and yeah, the benefit comes afterwards. They give you the medicine you need. Like, I'll tell you, for example, I didn't want to finish my law degree because I hated it. I absolutely loathed it. But my spiritual father told me, you started the degree, you're going to finish it. And you're going to get married now, so you're going to need a job. Okay? And I was like, oh, don't worry, God will provide. He says, yeah, He will provide, but you need a job. And now looking back at it, and I said this in my last talk when I was here, when was that? A year and a bit ago, that I came to Sydney and was able to study theology and work at the same time while supporting my family, and my wife could be home with my kids. Okay, I made all of that work just because I followed his advice. If I didn't follow his advice, I don't know how I would have finished my degree and been able to support my family in the process. I have 5 kids, by the way. Okay. So, I know exactly what you mean, and as soon as you said it, yeah, you can feel that, but yeah, hindsight being 2020 is helpful, because in the moment you don't feel that good. I'm glad you raised that. Thanks.
Yeah. I think we'll conclude there, unless Your Grace, Father Martha, Father Anastasios, want to add anything? Okay. We'll end it there. Can you give a round of applause, please? Anything to announce? Thanks for those who brought chocolate yesterday.
That's
the light. Different. We don't talk about Revelations. All you have to worry about is Tuesday night. But no, in all seriousness, obviously you've heard now maybe the first time or the second time Father Timothy speaking. He does have a youth fellowship at Crow's Nest in his parish fortnightly, Wednesday nights. Please give him a follow on Instagram, The Nest, because Father Timothy's anyways, you can see what he's given tonight, and you can make assumptions. My opinion is he's one of the good ones. So, not that there's bad ones. But, if you like what you heard tonight, please head over to Crow's Nest, and I'm sure Father will be very accommodating. So we'll stand up, we'll do a prayer. Thanks for coming. We'll be back next week as well. Where's the food? It's over there. It's always up the front. Over here, guys.
All together. Πάτερ ημών,
αγιαστήτω το όνομά σου, ελθέτω η βασιλεία σου, γεννηθήτω το θέλημά σου, ως στον ουρανό και επί της γης, των άρτων ημών των επιούσιων, ως ημίν σήμερον, και άφησε ημίν τα οφείλματα ημών, ως και εμείς αφήνουμε στον έτσι ημών, και εμείς συνέχιση μας του πειρασμών, αλλά λύσαι ημάς από τον δόξα Κύριε, ο Κύριο πνεύματι και νικαία, και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων αμήν, Κύριε Λέησον, δέσποτα ημών.
Lord Jesus Christ, bless the food of your servants, that you are the most holy one now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Διευχών των Αγίων Πατέρων ημών, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ο Θεός, ελέησον και σώσον ημάς. Amen. God bless you all.
Thanks for coming, everyone. guys, could I have your attention one moment, please? We've got a bit of a surprise for someone at our fellowship. Andrew, do you want to come over here? It's Andrew's birthday today, so a little cake. I've got a cake here, we're all going to sing.
He's got a nice voice.
You know. One second. This is Koi Style Organisation. We'll come to the front here. Andrew, right? Oh, you're behind me. Okay. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Andrew. Happy birthday to you. Happy.
Μεγάλος να γίνεις με άσπρα μαλλιά. Παντού να σκορπίζεις, τις νιώθεις στο φως και όλοι να λένε να ένα σοφός. That's the Greek version of Happy Birthday.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have some cake around.